Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pastikas. I'm so glad you're here. With the Brave Women at Work podcast, you'll get the resources and tips along with real-world stories and humor to empower and inspire you to take bolder and braver actions in your career and life. Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pastikas. I'm so glad you're here. Well, hey everyone, how are you doing out there this week? I'm going to start by saying I'm getting old. At least that's how I feel sometimes. Do you want to know why I feel this way? I'll give you an example. So I do something called the movie test in personal or professional situations to see kind of the cultural temperature of like what people know. And at one point in my life, when I was much younger, my mom or other folks would tell me about a movie from the 60s or tell me a movie that was even older than that, and I wouldn't know. So I have been on every end of the spectrum of the movie and the cultural test. So now it's my turn as a middle-aged person to do the same. So the weather has been nice in Chicagoland, thank goodness. And I was recently taking and you're gonna be like, what? My 18 and a half year old dog. Yes, my 18 and a half year old dog. His name is Jake Ryan, out for a mini walk just because poor man, can't, go all the way around the block right now. And he's such a little old dude. So yes, you heard it right. He's 18 and a half, which is the equivalent, I believe, of about 90 in human years. I've looked it up via Google on his age equivalent, those little charts of like dog years to human years. And most of the dog year calendars, they stop at age like 16 or 17. So who knows? Who knows? And if the man makes it to 20, I will definitely let y'all know. Even if he makes it to 19, we'll be on a Jake Ryan watch. And when he goes and crosses the Rainbow Bridge, I will be so sad because he's been with me since, let's see, so 18 years. He was born in 2007. So he is my first baby, my first fur baby, and is older than both of my daughters. So he's been with me for the duration. So when I was on this little walk, a mom and her daughter in my neighborhood, they stopped me to pet Jake because my dog looks like a perpetual puppy. He's like a little 10-pounder. He's mixed with a Bichon. He's called like a Shishan. So he's a Shih Tzu and a Bichon mix. So he's like 10 pounds soaking wet. And so he's super cute, even though he's older, and he's a little deceiving because he looks like a puppy. So the mom asked if Jake Ryan, my little Jake, was a puppy. And I chuckled, like I said, because she didn't know, but I'm like, no. I was like, he's 18 and a half. And then I went to share. I don't know. I overshared. Have you ever done that? I overshared and said that his name, Jake Ryan, was after the character. And if for those that remember this movie, his name was after Jake Ryan from 16 Candles. It was a 1980s famous movie. And I got this like smile, like she's being kind of nice to me, but I got this like blank stare smile. And then I immediately had this sinking, I'm old feeling that this mom was trying to be nice to me, but that she had no idea what I was talking about, like no cultural reference. So I felt like 155 years old. And then I went home and I think I texted or called like my very dear friend Pam to make sure that I was okay. Honestly, I was like, am I okay? Like, how old am I? How old are we? Because we're similar age. So she confirmed that I was indeed okay and that there had to be something wrong with this other person, obviously. Just kidding. But it was just like that jarring cultural moment where I'm like, wow, I am not of the same generation as this person in front of me. And so I've tried this like movie cultural reference also with my team members at work. And the same thing inevitably happens. So I've just stopped trying. I've actually made movie lists for some of my team members. That's always fun. And they completely miss the references that I mention. Even some of the phrases that I mentioned, they're like, huh? Huh? So And on the reverse, in fairness, I miss their references. I think I stopped really paying attention to music as soon as my oldest daughter was born. I just lost the cultural pulse because I went into a new phase of my life. So I guess I'll just ask, do you feel me? So if you are in your like mid 40s or in your 40s, your like 50s, if you're like kind of getting into that area of your life, mid career, it kind of goes with the territory and we kind of lose touch. And so this, my friends, is indicative. It's a fun example, but it's indicative of generational divides, generational differences, and like cultural, what we need at work, what our preferences are. And so I'm solidly in, as I'll reference in today's show, the Gen X generation, which is from 1965 to 1980. So if you were born from 1965 to 1980, you are in that Gen X generation. And the differences that I and we highlight today, my guest and I, Meghan Grace, it's just, it's interesting. It's informative. It is so important for us to understand as leaders, as employees, as team members, as colleagues. And we don't get trained this at all, right? So when I found out about Meghan Grace, I wanted to get a pen and a paper, like old school, like college, and take notes because as a leader, I have all types of employees along the span. So I have some colleagues that are baby boomers. I have some team members that are fellow Gen X. I have millennials. I have Gen Z, and they're not all the same. We're not all baked the same way. And so Megan is such a wealth of knowledge on all things regarding the generations. So the conversation was a fun mix of taking like an academic course. So if you really want to dive into like and geek out on generations, this is the show for you. Paired with, and I just like therapy because Megan understands the generational differences so keenly. I felt like I was quote unquote seen as a Gen X. I was like, wow, you really see me. Like things that I didn't even know or things that I didn't haven't thought about in a long, long time. She called out on this show. So during our discussion, we chatted about what led Megan into generational studies, which is such a unique field of work and one you can see the passion comes through in our conversation. Megan was gracious enough to provide an overview of each of the generations and their key attitudes about their work. And then she also went into what the needs are of each generation, which was fascinating. We then homed in on Gen Z. So I had a wonderful guest and colleague and friend, Stephanie Jung, several episodes. Like I think it was in 2024, maybe even 2023. So we'll link that up in the show notes. But she talked about the differences as a millennial and why millennials get a bad rap. So this time when we talked about generations, we really homed in on Gen Z and their need for story and the why. So the question of why we're doing the things we're doing behind business decisions and how that could rub like a boomer or a Gen X very much the wrong way because we're more of like, you just tell us to do it as an authority and we just do it. And how Gen Z is very different and their expectations around story and understanding the why of things is just, it's just table stakes for them. How Megan's book, Generations in the World of Work, came to be. And we also kind of dove in briefly on Megan's, just she has a wealth of resource on her website. So if you're looking for mini courses on generations, and I think this should be required learning for all leaders, check out her site because it is pretty stocked. So here is more about Megan. Meghan Grace has loved learning since kindergarten, maybe even before that. Megan's mom will tell if she were here that she begged to start hooked on phonics because she couldn't wait to go to school. That sounds like me. After a lot of time in the classroom, Megan's love for learning has not gone away. From her time at Chapman University, the University of Arizona, and Vanderbilt University, Megan has been committed to learning how to help others learn and grow since the beginning of her career. Now, Meghan focuses her energy on helping others learn, grow, and be better as a consultant, speaker, and podcast host. A big part of her professional journey has centered around researching generations and establishing the Institute for Generational Research and Education, IGRE. Beyond Nicole's work on generations, she has used her background in organizational development, research, data strategies, strategic planning, curriculum design, and program and project management to work with clients and partners to improve individual practices and develop organizational strategies. So, if Brave Women at Work and this podcast has helped you grow personally or professionally, be sure to share it with a friend, family member, or colleague and help us by spreading the good word. You can do that by hitting the subscribe button and getting that into your weekly feed so you can watch the very latest and greatest interviews. And I'm going to start interjecting some more solo episodes again. I promise. Girl Scout, is it 3 fingers up? Yes. Girl Scout honor. And then of course you can leave a rating and review to help the show continue to gain traction and grow. And then I also want to remind everyone, if you're looking for ways to work with me, I have a couple spots that are available for individual coaching. So you can learn more about the whole coaching process by clicking on the book a discovery session. Once you do that, you enter your information. It's a 30-minute completely complimentary session. So we can learn more about you. I would love to learn more about any career goals, struggles that you're facing. And then I can explain how I uniquely work with my clients and what sets my work apart as a coach for you. The other coaching option is to join the Brave Circle, which is a monthly coaching membership. And it is a group coaching opportunity where you can just dip your toe into the pool of coaching, the coaching water. And it's low in terms of price point. It's low in terms of like the number of hours you have to spend on it per week. But you bring your coaching to a group of women. And I coach each person in the circle, and the circles are curated specifically based on where people are in their life stages, their career stages. So I would love for you to learn more. Again, all of that is on my website at bravewomenatwork.com. Also, the last announcement is last chance for the Thrive in 25 Women's Leadership Conference here in Chicagoland, June 25th through 28th. So if you would like to invest in yourself this year, I'm going to challenge you to do that. We have 18 speakers that are going to be sharing. I can't even tell you how much wisdom, how much knowledge, experience on topics such as, so what would you get out of this if you attend? You're going to learn how to negotiate for your next, raise, your next job opportunity, what have you. You're going to learn how to up your LinkedIn game on your profile. You're going to learn from CEOs, entrepreneurs about the road to higher level leadership, if that's what you want to do. You're going to have resources on the other side of this conference that are unlike any conference that I've ever seen before. And that's just kind of a small snippet. So last chance, last call. So again, if you're looking for your sign to sign up and invest in yourself, this is the last opportunity. So you can learn more and register at thrive-in25.com. Again, thrive-in25, the numbers 25.com. All right, let's welcome Meghan to the show. Well, hello, Meghan. Welcome to Brave Women at Work. How are you today?
I'm so good. It is wonderful to be here and chat with you.
Of course. And everyone, I met Megan's cat before, and she was a sweetheart, although she tried to actually become like a co-interviewee, actually.
And she's probably still gonna try. I think anyone that's ever had a Zoom meeting with me at all has met her. Like she's like a weird omnipresent element of working with me. And even when I presented my doctoral dissertation, which was on Zoom in the middle of 2020,
Oh, wow.
Waffles was right there. And I said, I think this is probably my most important presentation. Could you just like give me a break? And she said, no, like we're in it together, lady.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Waffle, if you are watching this on YouTube, she is hanging. Oh, here she is Hello, Waffle. So if you're not on, you'll be like, who is this person? She is a beautiful. What kind of cat is she?
She's an orange tabby. They're
Uh,
actually female orange tabbies are like 5% of orange tabbies. Most of them are male. So
oh.
there you go. Oh my goodness, she's taking me down. Taking me down the whole audio setup. No, they're pretty rare. So every vet she's ever had is like, she's a special girl. I'm like, she does not need additional strokes to
Attention.
her ego. Yeah, she doesn't.
That's awesome. Well, she's unique. She's her own queen. She's her own breed, as we are, right? We all are that
Mhm.
are listening. So, tell us a little bit more about you. As if you've listened to the show, anyone, you know I love women's stories. That's why I do this. So, Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and how you've gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting question because like time moves so fast, right? And you're like, here we are. But I really started in the journey of understanding generations by accident about 10, almost 11 years ago now. I was working on a college campus, and my co-author and research partner, Dr. Corey C. Miller, and we just noticed our students felt different one day. Like they were asking just very different questions in like new student orientation. And it felt like just a shift in what they were trying to get out of the college experience and what they were trying to at the time we were working with a leadership program and what they were trying to get out of a leadership program. And so both being kind of academics and kind of both having this training of research in our back pocket, we started down the path of realizing no one was really studying Generation Z. And they were very presently in higher education. And so is part selfish, right?
Hmm.
And we wanted to know our students better so we could do better work with the students in our leadership program. And that really, I say, like spiraled in a good way. It just turned into us carving out a niche of an area of what now today is more generational research. I would say my professional identity is being a generational researcher. But when I'm not researching and writing about generations, speaking about generations, I do a lot of work in consulting. So I do org development. I don't want to say on the side, but it's about 60-40, 65-35 split. And integrating data insights into strategic planning and just data-driven decision making in general is kind of the world that I live in. And so that's really the heart of what I've always done is when we wanted to know about our students more and there wasn't data that existed, we went and generated it so we could create more informed experiences for the students. And so in today's life, I'm still squarely working with a lot of friends in higher education, both the colleges, universities, as well as organizations and companies that kind of sit adjacent to higher ed. But with this generational piece of it, still do a lot of work with workforce as well in the workplace because Gen Z is not just in higher education. They're turning 30 this year. And so as they're turning 30, they're pretty squarely in some of their early career jobs and their first jobs. And so they're making waves in the workplace. And it's been really fun to kind of grow up with them. But as we've grown up with Gen Z, we've also learned like we have to study all four generations that are living together in workplaces and making sure we're creating a collaborative experience.
Okay, so everyone, when I met you, Megan, I was like, yes, I want to be selfish and pick your brain because I am solid Gen X and I don't understand some of the generations. Like I don't, like when I have like millennial, I'm like, okay, we've been working together and coexisting for a long time, but my Gen Z friends, like I'm like, oh, like I don't fully understand. So I am hoping you can educate us and people leaders, please listen in because I think this will be a good education on how we can coexist and not only coexist, but also like really work well together and have, relationships and that understanding. So if you can start, you said the four generations. So obviously I'm thinking baby boomers, Gen X, that would be me and a lot of people that listen to the show, millennials and Gen Z. Can you give maybe some like overarching, I know this is a monstrous question, but just overarching like work characteristics of the generations in the workforce today?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely spot on with the four that we're really focusing on. And I think it's helpful to just kind of start like generations are sometimes misunderstood a little bit, but it's just like our age identity. It's just like our any other one of our social identities, right? So the way that we see the world is an identity, and how we navigate the world and how the world treats us is an identity. And it's not one of the ones that we can technically choose, right? And so it's one of these things that we are a part of a generation. A generation is really just a cohort of people that were
Hmm.
born around the same time. It's much like when you go to college and you're part of the first year student cohort, right? Like you all ended up at that university, and that's a thing that you all share. And or maybe it's you are raised in a specific religion and there's a culture around that religion. Generational cohorts are very similar, right? Like we're all kind of grouped together within about 15 to 20 years, and we have a relatively similar, to some degree, right? Like generations aren't monoliths, degree of understanding a culture that's like our social behavioral norms among our peers. And when we look at the generational cohorts that we're working with today, baby boomers are our friends that are born between 1946 and 1964. So that post World War II boom, we just were in a much more stable environment after World War II. And so people were like, yeah, we should probably expand families. And we also, just an economic transformation in the United States allowed for supporting what was truly a boom of humans that occurred right after the World War II. Today, we see our boomers are our friends that are, some of them are still in the workforce working full time. They are having longer lifespans than previous generations. They're healthier, they're focused on staying healthy, and they're going to probably live longer than previous generations have. And so they're working longer in full-time capacities, but many of them are having kind of that golden career where they're working a part-time job and something completely unrelated to the 40 to 50 years prior that they were working. And so we see this generation is really, they're a hardworking generation. They bring a lot of experience and expertise to the spaces where they've been employed and where they've been working. And we just see that this is a generation that is very characterized by prosperity, and then also the desire to have prosperity. And so that's really present in their mindset, just because it's been a part of really their cultural understanding of the world since their earliest days. So baby boomers, they bring just a really important kind of view to work as well, in the sense that they saw most of their career prior to a digital transformation. Which is still important from an institutional and historical knowledge perspective. So we love our baby boomers, whether they're still working full time or some of them are in that kind of like maybe part time or golden career phase of life. Many are working on retirement and kind of like figuring out what that looks like, as active older adults are still staying active and healthy. They're not just retiring and passing away 5 years later for the most part, right? Like they've still got a pretty long runway of life ahead of them. And so what does that last bit of life look like? And that's what many of them are kind of thinking about right now. Gen X, our friends born 1965 through 1979, 1980, right around there. And smaller generation compared to compared to baby boomers and millennials. And really what's unique about this generation is I find them to be incredibly adaptable. Like an adaptable characteristic of them is because they were really split with their kind of upbringing being right at the forefront of that digital transformation. And so while they remember a good chunk of life prior to really what is our more modern digital life, they still did work analog. Many of them went to college and they were still going to the library to write papers. And they were some of the first users of personal computers. And they were at the forefront of that. And so they have the adaptability and that like kind of that tech adoption. However, they're also appreciative and can kind of play both ways when it comes to keeping it analog in life. With this generation, they were one of the first generations to have both parents most of the time working outside the home. And so they're really resilient. They were our latchkey kids. They took themselves home after school, let themselves in, did their homework, maybe some chores, watched TV, got a snack, all without supervision. And so they've really taken that into the workplace, and they're very, very independent, like to work autonomously, still like the collegiality of working with others, but they're very, they want to be trusted to be able to do the thing that they were tasked with doing without needing too much oversight. So just a very, again, they were letting themselves in after school, they can handle it, right? Like that's kind of the mindset that Gen X has. Millennials, huge generation, got a lot of attention, born 1980 through 1994, just behemoth of a generation, because most of them, their parents are baby boomers. So like the maths at that point, right? So we've got big baby boomer generation, big millennial generation. Millennials, they have a little bit of that analog memory, but really with majority of their life, they have been kind of at the forefront of that social media element, and the fact that like technology is not just a one-way transfer, but a two-way transfer and an opportunity for connection. Millennials, where they're squarely at in kind of the career space is a lot of our mid career, which a lot of people are like, no, it's the social media intern. I'm like, no, some millennials are turning 40 this year. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
raising families, they have multiple children, they are like in the throes of approaching middle age,
Mm-hmm.
in the very oldest side of it. And so they are our generation that's probably been the most studied until we got to Gen Z, mostly because social science that was really around the concept of generations, we were able to scale that so much more. So doing more generational study has ramped up year after year, because we're able to do research on people a lot easier than we were in, say, the 1980s, 1970s. And so we know a lot more about millennials. They got a lot of attention growing up, mostly because by their sheer size, the fact they looked at things a little bit differently, just like every generation does,
Mm-hmm.
they got a lot of flack. I think that the heat's come off the millennials a little bit now that we're like settled into adulthood. But there was a lot of generational beef with millennials when they were coming to college, when they were coming into the workforce. They are very, I would say, social collaborative type people, but also they've inherited some workplace perspectives of previous generations, that they're kind of trying to shake off. And that's an interesting note. Hopefully we can get into a little bit later.
Yes, of course.
And then Gen Z, our youngest generation in the workplace right now, we use the years 1995 to 2010. And so the very oldest are turning 30 this year, which is kind of weird for me to think about. But the oldest are turning 30. The very youngest are wrapping up high school. They're very squarely in the early career planning, career development phase of life. Some of them have been in careers for 7-8 years now, and it might be moving closer to middle management. But then again, that's their very the very oldest. Majority of them are going to be the early hires, the interns, really the newer professionals in our industries. And this generation is just, they've lived in a hyper digital world their entire life. They do not remember a world prior to the internet. Like it doesn't exist for them. It's just a stark difference from our baby boomer colleagues that have a very large and long memory of that.
Mm-hmm.
This generation is very informed, because they can find just about anything online that they might need. And they bring
Mm-hmm.
that into that. And so they're also they've been very shaped by being informed and having society happen and the rate of change happen very frequently. That they bring kind of this mindset of like the world kind of seems icky and horrible because that's all I see online sometimes. But I want to improve it. They're very socially driven, social change oriented, and the desire to hopefully improve the world for other people. So
Mm.
that's our 4 cohorts. I tried to give you almost 100 years of humans as fast as I could.
Thank you. Wow, that was a very impressive. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit further. So, I mean, I think that there are perceptions, like you said, like the millennials got like a bad rap, things like that. What are the need want differences like in terms of work, right? Like what are the baby boomers need want to be successful at work? And then we'll go through the 4 generations. And then I'm going to have some questions on that. Like you said briefly that Gen X, which makes sense, right? So 2
Mhm.
characteristics really quick on my experience is that my kids are even beyond Gen Z. I think they're called Alpha, which I know I asked you before we started recording about, can we even talk about that? And you're like, no, it hasn't even really been studied yet because they're not even 18 years old, So that'll be an
Mhm.
interesting because they're even more hyper into technology than probably even Gen Z or, like
Mhm.
related. So in Gen X, I remember I lived overseas for a year when I was in college, and it was such a scary thing, Megan, because I had no cell phone. I was not connected. Like I had to stand by a payphone. This sounds like I like walked in the snow, to get to school,
Yeah.
but that was my equivalent of it, right? Like I had to stand by a payphone to call my mom 4,000 miles away. I didn't have a cell phone, right? If I had a cell phone, I would be like, it would be a totally different game changer. Who cares like where
Mhm.
I am in the world, right? That connectivity was not there. And
Yeah.
so, versus like my kids don't even like when they see on Amazon Prime, like we don't have it like where it's paid, where there's no commercials or whatever, the streaming service. They're like, what's this? Like, why am I being interrupted in the middle of my TV show? Right. So there's just like a
Hmm.
big, stark difference. So I want to kind of go through maybe the preconceived notions or the needs wants of each of these generations, because
Hmm.
this is where I think it gets a little challenging for people leaders, because we have notions of what people need and want, and maybe that's not really true. So can you talk about that in a work context?
Absolutely. So our most recent book, Generations in the World of Work, which I know we'll kind of talk about like how it came to be, but it's something that we never intended to do. But we're
Okay.
so glad we did. Like again, like half of my generational career is what I call like one big Bob Ross happy accident. And that is exactly
Love Bob
what
Ross.
love. I mean, he's like so grounding, but like it's true. It's like just put a bird there, right? And like that's just like, oh, let's just do a study there. And that is how life with generational work has kind of unspiraled, like unfolded for us. And so in our most recent book, we were able to do a study on 4 generations, being able to really do clear cut delineation between the 4 and identify where there's similarities and where there's trends. And one of the things that we did look at is like why people work, what they want in a workplace, and what they need to be productive. And you're like, oh,
Mm,
that doesn't seem too complicated. And it's not, but it does help when we start to think like, okay, what are the things that are universal? Like that if you're a people leader, you absolutely need to be focusing on regardless of generation. And then looking at what are the things that are necessary to actively engage and productively engage each generation differently, because they are bringing a different kind of viewpoint to work. So when we think about like why people work, like the motivation to work, predominantly the thing that's like right in the center is like people want to work to get paid. They want to feel like they have a purpose. And again, everyone's purpose is individual and subjective, even across generations. And then utilizing their skills. They want to feel like they have something to do, and that they are everyone feels productive in different ways and likes doing different things. If you've taken any personality assessment, you know that. But using one's skills, because it does give us a sense of accomplishment. And so like doesn't matter if we're talking about people in 1925 or 2025, people want to
mm,
earn money, feel like they have a sense of purpose, and can use their skills effectively. When we think about where people are, different generations are working, and where we see some kind of nuance. So with our friends that are baby boomers, they're really looking at stability and feeling productive. They've always kind of seen work as a place to earn an income, to create a stable life. Again, that element of prosperity. And that
mm,
prosperity is different than like, I need an inordinate amount of wealth, right? It's the idea of like creating a healthy and stable home environment, whatever that looks like. And
mm-hmm,
they're still continuing that in their like later phases of life, because they're moving into retirement and they want that stability. And so they're kind of preparing for that.
mm-hmm,
For Gen X and millennials, kind of our middle generations, we see that connection with others and collegiality, more of that communal feel at work, is more present. Even though it manifests in very different ways, right? So like Gen X feels like they're like, I'm out on my own, I'm gonna do my own autonomous thing, but they still want a lifeline back to a community.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And some of that comes from these 2 middle generations have been much more apt to be like, I'm going to go take a job in another state across the country, where I might work there for 5 years and then I might move somewhere else and do a job. And that was not really a thing that previous generations did. Like that was a huge undertaking to do that. And so
mm-hmm,
they look at the workplace as an opportunity for connection. And so they want a sense of connection, collegiality in the workplace.
mm,
Millennials are also still in that developmental phase in their careers of wanting a sense of legitimacy, and this idea of having almost like a portfolio of work that allows them to say like, I'm legit, I'm building my expertise. And then similarly, they share that mindset with Gen Z, as these are kind of again the second half of the work, or the younger
mm-hmm,
half of the workforce, is still seeking out how they can carve their kind of their path of expertise, building their skills, and making sure that they have that clear trajectory in their careers. And so that's what people are across generations are viewing as why they would work. Um, when we think about like what people want in a workplace, universally, we see that people, regardless of generation, want trust, in the workplace, which is, I like to remind employers and organizations, that's a two-way street, right? Like, you want to trust your employees, they want to be able to trust you that you have their best interests in mind. So they want
Mm-hmm.
trust, effective communication, and a healthy and safe work environment. Like, Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs in the workplace
Mm-hmm.
is just trust, effectively communicating with others, and a healthy and safe environment. Where we see a little bit of that generational nuance, baby boomers really want a workplace that's characterized by integrity. So rules, fairness, structure.
Mm.
Um, Gen X wants flexibility, not surprising there, knowing what we know about their ability to like kind of self-manage. And millennials and Gen Z are desiring more of this idea of meaningful work so that what they're doing makes an impact. The company might have a social offshoot or the ability to create an impact, but not just like working to work, but making sure that they're a part of something that matters. And so we see that shift in what generations think the workplace should be characterized. I'm going to pause there before we go into what they need for productivity. What do you think?
Okay, so I can relate with all of this. So I'll bring some real world examples. So baby boomers. So when I told my mom that I was going to be moving, I'm from Indiana. I
Hmm.
know you're in the Nashville area, so I'm from Indiana suburbs of
Hmm.
Chicago, right? And I told my mom, like, hey, I have a job opportunity in Indianapolis. It's not like I was moving to California or New York, but it
Hmm.
was like a big deal for me to move to Indianapolis, like back in the day, right? And my brother and his family are still in that local area, right? It's like I don't know. It was like I don't want to say a commune, but like no one leaves the region, right? No one
Hmm.
leaves, right? So that sounds to me, but I'm going to stop there. Is that like more of that baby boomer, like where it is a really tough thing to move on, and that I broke something in that familial mold to move even 4 hours away?
Hmm. A little bit of that. Yeah, it's not necessarily like breaking the mold as much as I think industry and economy made it a little bit easier to
Okay.
explore jobs outside of your hometown, right? Like before,
Okay.
again, the concept of like you oftentimes get a job through someone you know. Well, when technology expands and allows us to know people outside of our hometown or outside of our college town or the town where we lived immediately after college, we recognize that there's opportunities for jobs that are good fit for us that might be in the next town over, might be in the next state over, or might be across the country. And so we have
Okay.
exposure to more people in today's world. And we have the ability through the internet to say, huh, that's a good job. It's based in New York, might have to move to New York to do it if it requires in person work.
Mm-hmm.
And so younger generations have had more access to a more, let's just say, national and international network and the ability to search for opportunities beyond just their immediate circle. And so that's why we see other generations kind of like with that desire to, I don't want to say be more particular, but potentially move away and do something different than previous generations. A kind of a caveat there. If we go down this rabbit hole, Gen Z is actually kind of not bucking that idea, but they are willing to stay a little bit closer to home because it is financially advantageous to be a
Yeah,
little
no,
bit
they get
closer
it,
to,
right?
yeah,
Like where we may have had the tail end of that prosperity, we're going to do better
yeah.
than our parents. I mean, and I don't want to be kind of blanket here, but I think that, I mean, we're in a tough environment
Hmm.
economically, not going into anything else beyond that, but it's tough, right? Like you go to the
Yeah.
grocery store and, food costs are just insane, right? And so they understand that maybe it is advantageous to go to college for the first 2 years of school, for example,
Hmm.
or to get a home, like get a home in your same neighborhood or, a familial home or whatever. So I think that they're adapting to the current situation.
Yeah, and there's been a few different studies around like what are the hot markets for Gen Z. Like they really want to buy a home. So they're not going to move to New York City in their 20s to attempt to rent for 10 years to maybe buy a multi-million dollar home in their 30s. It's not where they're looking at mid-level markets where it's still enjoyable for young people to be. They can have a good job, maybe a remote job or a hybrid job where they're only having to go into a major city once a week kind of thing, but they're willing to look at it in the long run. And so this generation is attracted to mid-sized markets to some degree because it's allowing them financial stability and they're thinking further down the road, not just like, am I going to have a nice time in my 20s? And so that's just an interesting mindset that Gen Z is bringing into not only their like work choices, but also their life choices, and yes, where they're going to school, if they're going to school, and then how far away they're moving from their parents, because they're also very close with their parents. Whereas like I left at 18 for, I'm a millennial, left for at 18. I think I lived with my parents for 2 weeks total at a time during the school year, during
Wow.
holiday breaks. And then I was working over the summer near my college. Then I moved a state over, then I moved across the country. We now live in the same city, but for the years of my 20s, I was all over the place, different states away, and my brothers were the same way. And so it's just a
Interesting.
shift. It's just a
It's a
shift.
shift in perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other thing before we move on to needs is, so like now representing again Gen X and maybe even millennials, I don't know. So when COVID hit and when we had this whole hybrid, that kind of blew my mind. And like as a Gen X, I'm like, oh heck yeah, like I want the flexibility to do work on my own terms. Oh heck yeah. So my level of frustration with companies non-named that are kind of shifting back the opposite direction to full five in the office, like is probably higher than maybe my baby boomer friends, right? And like my
Mhm.
baby boomer, mother and stuff like that. So is that hyper independence also probably showing up there? Because I love the concept of hybrid work there. Could be a
Mhm.
personal preference, but I'm also wondering if Gen X really would take to that hybrid and beyond, millennials and Gen Z would take to that hybrid work environment more than our boomers would.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of life stage progression. So
Okay.
yes, it's, I would say, hyper present with Gen X. Like if you do any workplace study, Gen X is like, please give me freedom or give me death, right? Like give me flexibility or I will find a new place to work. And I've never met a
Okay.
single, okay, I don't want to be like they're a monolith, but I've never met a single Gen Xer that wasn't like, I just need a little bit of space to do my thing.
Okay.
Like they don't want to be boxed in by a bunch of rules. Like they want rules for fairness. They want people to be treated right, but at the same time they don't want to be like overburdened with things that like feel like it's over
God, I feel
people.
so seen. Okay.
I know sometimes it's, Jen, sometimes it turns into therapy. Sometimes talking to me also turns into me, like people ask about their kids and I'm like giving parenting advice, and it's fine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
Well, I won't go
I've
there. I
learned,
promise. I'm not going
I've
to
got,
make that about me, but
no,
I
it's
do feel
okay.
seen.
Good, good. Yeah. But if we want to shift to productivity needs, because
Yeah.
it's so present, and when we ask different generations, like, what do you need to be productive at work? Like,
Yes.
what's your
Let's do it.
ideal setup? Gen X is like, they want to be able to collaborate with other people across teams, but they want flexible work structures. Like, it's like they've told us in so many ways and so many different words, they just want flexibility. That's what Gen X needs to be productive. And they want balance in their workload. They don't want to be overwhelmed. And when you think about where this generation is at, with Gen X, like they are raising young people predominantly, like they are the parents of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So they've got young people that they're balancing young people's schedules. So they've got a generation below them most of the time if they've chosen to be parents. But a lot of them also have a generation above them where they
Yes.
are supporting parents who are aging, potentially retired, and potentially passing. So like they are dealing with two distinct sets of needs in their family lives outside of work. And so that flexibility is necessary to be able to be like, I need to go to the 3 o'clock soccer game for my child, or I need to go check on my mom that might be in a senior living facility and I want to spend time with her and have
Yes.
lunch with her, right? Like it's both of those things that are occurring. But Gen X is like, I'm probably also going to do my emails from 8 to 9 after my family is settled in for the evening, and I'm just going to catch up for the next day. So
Mm-hmm.
they might want to take off at 2:30 on a Tuesday to catch that soccer game, go see their mom, and they're going to get all their stuff done. So like that's Gen X. Like
Okay.
what we're seeing is they want flexibility and they want a balanced workload that they can have autonomy over.
Okay. Very helpful.
I don't think they're asking for anything wild, right? Like just tell them what you need to do, give them an opportunity to collaborate with other people, and they're going to be heavily productive and reliable.
Okay.
So that's what we see with our needs for Gen Xers. For baby boomers, they want a little bit more structure. So they want to be like, this is the time you need to be here. This is what you need to get done, with a little bit of flexibility. I think about my dad. My dad's probably about a year or two away from retiring. He's a baby boomer, like squarely right in the middle. And he just wants to know, like, can he work from home on Fridays? Cool. What needs to get done Monday through Thursday? What meetings need to occur? And he's going to get it done. He just wants really, they, in general, baby boomers are going to be most productive when you give them clear goals and schedules and let them be. They've spent probably 40 years in their industry. They have historical knowledge and they also have expertise where they don't need a lot of babysitting. But they do want an opportunity to collaborate with others because they see it as an opportunity to share their knowledge, to share their expertise. And so it's not that like we lock away the baby boomers and say like crank out work till you retire. They still want an opportunity to mentor people. They still want an opportunity to give back and share their expertise. And so it's a missed opportunity to engage them in a productive manner by not capturing the knowledge information that they do have before they retire.
I love it. Okay, so let's go to millennials.
Millennials, again, we want flexibility, much like our friends in Gen X, but flexibility from a little bit of a different perspective. So yes, millennials are probably raising younger human beings as well. Most of the time they're like preteens, or if not like early teens, or even little ones that many millennials are raising. And so we know kids' schedules require not a corporate schedule. Just doesn't, that's not how it works. So they want flexible work structures, but it's also for the fact that millennials want to balance a holistically healthy life. So we see that millennials want to be able to take a gym class and it might occur at 11 o'clock because that's the best time that fits their meeting schedule. So they too might do the 8 to 9 o'clock emails, but they want to take their lunch break and go take Pilates class or go for a walk, get out of the office, because they believe in like this holistic healthiness and a holistic life. And so sometimes, again, that's not sitting within the same structure of a 9 to 5 where you need to be at your desk for 8 hours a day.
I'll have some questions on this. Okay, let's go to Gen Z.
Oh, and then one other thing about millennials is they're really looking for opportunities for technology to help automate their work, because they're very pro integration of technology if it's going to allow them to spend time at work doing the things that they find to be enjoyable, which is more of that human connection, collaboration, and relationship building. And so they see automation as an opportunity not to replace jobs, but to infuse jobs with things that allow for the human element of it to work. And then for Gen Z, they want clearly defined accountability. They want to know why the accountability is there. So they are not anti-policies. They just want to know why they exist. And they want space to be able to ask questions about that. They are in desire of flexible work structures as well. However, with the right delivery, would be willing to come into the office if we're explaining why we are doing in-person work and what the benefit is. They're not just going to sign up for it right away. So if we have to explain like, yeah, we're going to do 2 in-office collaboration days, the whole purpose of that is connection with the team, strategizing, and it's not just doing busy work next to each other. They can do their busy work at home is how they look at it. They can do their busy work at a coffee shop on their own time. Something that's unique to this generation is they want to know, to be productive, they need to know how the work they're doing is connecting to a larger purpose. They want mission-driven work, and it doesn't mean that like, oh, we're going to save the world. Like not every company is going to save the world, but they want to know how their work contributes to something a little bit bigger than just doing the spreadsheets, which we know the spreadsheets are important, but they want to know how it all rolls up and the impact that can be made. And that's something that can be really easily done with our people managers to talk about the impact of each job and the role that specific position is going to play in the larger kind of scheme of an organization.
Okay, so I learned something very important right there. So, and I'm generalizing, but with a baby boomer, I'm assuming like just tell them to do the spreadsheet, tell them what time to be there, like they're going to do the spreadsheet, right? Like a Gen X, tell them to do the spreadsheet. Like we don't really care, just give me some flexibility to do the spreadsheet. But like when I'm hearing like that millennial and the Gen Z, especially the Gen Z, this is the part where, again, generalizing, where I could see people, leaders, right, we're going to get there, could be irritated, right? Because a boomer and a Gen X are like, we're telling you to do the spreadsheet, do the spreadsheet. But the Gen Z is like, but what's the bigger purpose of the spreadsheet? Like, and then millennials are like, can we automate the spreadsheet? And like, those are questions that like my generation weren't taught even to ask, or even to be brave enough, going back to the millennials, like, hey, I have a Pilates class at 11. Like we weren't taught to do that. We were just like, you're going to have to fit your Pilates class in at 5 a.m. or at 7 p.m. because it's just not possible. So I think this is where some of that friction comes in. Again, generalizing, but do you have any comments on that?
No, you hit it right on the head. And it's the When we are asking the question, sometimes we're not as explicit. And I'm a big fan of coaching people to ask for needs. The worst thing
Mm-hmm.
that someone's going to tell you is no, they can't do that, right? So like you ask to go to the 11 a.m. Pilates class and you explain, oh, I feel more mentally clear and more productive after I've done a physical activity, and doing it at 5 in the morning is not going to work because I have small children. So if I'm going to be more productive instead of trudging through an hour, can I take the Pilates class? Right. Like the worst thing that's going to say is your manager going to be like, that's a little bit tough, but let's see if we can try it out. Right. Like the worst thing that's going to happen is say no. They're going to say no. That's it. And for Gen Z, it's this idea of, I think a lot of people, older generations, get intimidated by the audacity of Gen Z to ask a deeper question. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how dare
Mm-hmm.
they so young ask this question that is, if we pause and think about it, pretty valid question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the who gave you the bravery to do that? Like who gave you the I think it's audacity is the thing that a lot of people like. Who
Mm-hmm.
gave you the audacity to ask that question to me, your supervisor, or me, the department head? And Gen Z is not doing it out of insubordination. They're doing it because they want to understand the larger kind of system of things. And they want to understand in a good way, is this not necessarily, is this necessary because it's a waste of time, but is there a way that we could expedite our time to be more effective or more impactful?
Okay, so I learned another piece under there. So I interviewed another great guest. Her name is Tamsin Webster, and she has a whole book on being on change management. And
Mhm.
her book is Say What They Can't Unhear. And she talks about the power of story. And so what I'm hearing with like a Gen Z, maybe a millennial too, so confirm for me, is we have to tell them why. Like there has to be a deeper understanding underneath. We can't just like be a they're demanding leadership, not management. So like
Mhm.
they're like, don't just go do the widget. They're telling you, can you please tell me the story, the genesis of what's happening underneath the widget and what's the bigger impact of the widget? So that, and I want to talk to you about motivation. Is this like kind of the story? Is this like what motivates a Gen Z worker? Is that like that
Mhm.
larger why?
Mhm. Yes. So in our earlier studies on Gen Z, it's the idea of being able to make an impact. Like they want to make a positive impact on people in their lives. And again, impact is so subjective,
Right.
but they want to know how their efforts are connected to something a little bit bigger and a little bit more meaningful. And so if they can't clearly see, and this is always like, this comes back to leadership, to your point. Like if they can't see the impact and you're the leader of the organization or the team, it's your job to clarify that vision, right? Like it's your job as the leader to guide people towards the vision. If they're not understanding it, we cannot be upset with them. We need to look in the mirror and say, what can I do differently to help these people understand? And that's where I think, from a generational perspective, people are kind of put in a place of dissonance when a younger person asks them, hey, can you explain to me like why we do it this way? And they hear that, why are you doing it wrong? When in reality, they just want to know why we're doing it this way. And with a little bit of that backstory and that context, it can really
Mm-hmm.
help connect them. And I think you use the term storytelling. It's telling the saga, telling the lore of why we are doing what we're doing, helps people get connected to a deeper purpose. And if we go back to why people work, which is universal, they want to know how they're going to have a sense of purpose and a sense of impact and accomplishment. And that's where I think leadership misses the mark, is sometimes it's like, well, we know that, but maybe we're not communicating it to them. And then when they ask the question, we're like, how did you not understand that? And why, how dare you ask this question? But it's where we continue to pass down that same mindset of like, well, how come you didn't understand that? My generation understood that. Why can't you
Oh,
understand
yes. So I'm getting the also the thing like whereas a Gen X, like we're going to be frustrated because we don't have the flexibility. So now I'm going back to the workforces that are going in back full five, or they're kind of trying to like swing the pendulum back.
that?
So
Mm-hmm.
Gen X is going to be ticked because they don't have the flexibility. They may stay because they have a little bit more of that like I don't know, that lineage, like they're going to take it all the way to the end. Maybe, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like my millennials and our Gen Zers, they don't want to be like, butts in the chair, an 8 to 5 just to be there, whether it's they want to take the Pilates class, or they may say, well, why do I, like you mentioned earlier, like, why do I have to be here in an office to get it done when I can do my busy work like from a coffee shop and be so much happier for it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's workplace environmental design. Like it's that we're designing workplaces differently. And in younger
Okay.
generations, they've had a taste of the ability to be productive in a way where they have control over it. And I think that between you and I and anyone that's listening, what we all learned during the pandemic was that we can still get a lot of work done. And if we give people trust and if we allow them to develop a trusting relationship. And in my opinion, the reason why we're calling people back to work is that we're not learning how to manage people in a trusting environment where they trust us and we trust them to do their jobs.
So we're
And
going to have what you're saying again. Predicting, right? We don't know, right? We're not
mhm,
mind readers here, but that is going to bounce back. Like there is going to be some sort of backlash, and I think this might be too. There is there is some backlash on the millennials and the Gen Z. So when I interview them and I see, I've been at this job for 6 months, I've been at this job for nine
mhm,
months, I've been at this job for 1 year, because they have that brazenness because they're looking for the right environments.
mhm,
So like, my boomer friends and even my Gen X people be like, what the heck? Like, what happened to longevity? There is none, because
mhm,
they're brave enough to be like, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't have a bigger purpose, or I don't
mhm,
want a company that doesn't allow me to go to the Pilates class.
mhm, absolutely. They're willing to divest when things are no longer in alignment with their values. And that doesn't sit well with people, because it's I don't want to say it's like an adapt or die situation, but there is a relative energy with the two younger generations that if it's not a good fit, I don't have to waste my life being miserable or constructing my life around a job that is not healthy for me. And they kind of look at it, but it's a little bit more nihilistic with the younger generation with Gen Z, where they're like, tomorrow the world could be on literal fire. And you're going to be worried about a KPI that you have not told me if it makes an impact to any degree, but we're going to lose sleep over it. Absolutely not. Like, who even knows what tomorrow will hold? And so why am I
Yeah.
bothering myself and becoming an unhealthy person for a job that is not taking care of me? And I want to make sure that it's being heard correctly. That's not them being selfish. That's just them being a little bit self-protective because they've seen other generations burn themselves out to not necessarily get rewarded or taken care of in the way that they need to. And so they're like, I got to protect myself because I'm not sure other people have my best interest in mind. Corporations, no shade, but sort of shade, like have not necessarily always been at the forefront of having a reputation for being incredibly good at taking care of their workers, um, throughout the history of time. I think it's improved quite a bit, but I think our younger generations look at it and say, like, I don't know if I can put all my eggs in this basket. That this job, if it makes me unhealthy, makes me unhappy, is the thing that I need to commit to for the rest of my life, like this.
I have so much to learn, and I really appreciate. This is the reason I wanted to talk. It's just a reminder to us, because the folks that are listening to us predominantly are going to be more in that Gen X, or maybe we've got millennials in here, and even older, maybe some Gen Zers. You're all welcome to the Brave Woman at Work table. But we didn't learn that, right? When I say we, a
Mhm,
lot of our Gen X, we didn't know that. We were still in the halo of the boomers, that we had to pick a
mhm,
career and maybe a couple. We were like, what, 7 careers, right? I think it was our generation. About, you would have to tell me, but like we were known
mhm,
like, well, we were bouncing. We're nowhere near. We're
mhm.
nowhere near like what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, and I think it's there is a little bit of misconception even with the concept of bouncing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics like did they controlled for age, and baby boomers bounced around the same
Okay.
the amount that other and Gen X did too. It's because when you're in your early career phase, you're trying things on.
Yes, of
You might be
course.
going back to grad school. You might be interning. You might just, you're trying things on. And we look at that and be like, you were only there for a year. And they're like, I'm 22. That's 122, 122nd of my whole life that I was at this one. Like, so it's just a very different mindset and it's figuring out what's right. Um, and I think it's very easy to kind of forget that like we were once there too.
We
Um,
were once young.
we were once there too and trying to
I know.
figure out what's right. And but yes,
Uh,
there is it I think you've used the word brazen, and I like that because it's exactly right, where it's like, oh, these younger generations are coming in with a little spiciness and we're
I
not used
kind
to
of
the
love them.
spiciness.
I kind of love
Yeah.
them, right? So, okay, so we talked about how to motivate a Gen Z
Hmm.
worker really quick. We want to give them that why, that story. You said that lore. How
Yeah.
do we best communicate with them? Now, I'm only using my kids. My kids, I've got one that's literally on the opposite side of Gen Z. She was born in
Hmm.
2011, late 2011. So I think she's an alpha. She's like the oldest alpha, I believe.
Hmm.
But I can't get her, like, she has her first cell phone. I can't get her to call me back. I mean, I can't, the woman doesn't even text, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, like, if I don't snap her or like figure out, it's hard for me to figure out how to communicate. So,
Yeah.
how do we best communicate? Let's go to the latter half, like millennials and Gen
Yeah.
Z. How do we communicate with them?
So millennials are going to be like, we have to go back to like where we learn communication norms and what we establish with our peers is some of the first communication habits we develop. So Gen Xers, y'all had phones in your rooms. You had your landline
Mm-hmm.
and you sat and you talked with your friends after school like that. So you're like, yeah, I'll pick up the phone because you're
Yeah.
not scared of it. That's how you and your friends connected. So you take that into the workplace. For millennials, they were our first generation that was really, really big about like instant messaging, AOL Instant Messenger. May she rest in peace. That was like what we did after school, right?
Yeah.
MySpace did, like we were DMing and messaging and kind of that short interchange. And so millennials can kind of play nice with everybody. Like we kind of hear, but no one really likes an unprompted phone call. Like no one is just like, random number, let me pick up. Or an unplanned phone call from your boss is enough to like strike anxiety into millennials and Gen Z, right?
Okay.
Like if you're just going to call me and you're not going to give me any context, I'm convinced I'm fired. Like I'm convinced of it, right? Like
Oh,
if
really interesting. Like I
yeah,
wouldn't. Like I'd be like, okay, because I'm so used to the phone, like in my
correct.
younger years. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so it's one of those things of context matters in communication, no matter what generation
Mm-hmm.
you're part of. And so for millennials, and you want to give them the context, like what's the call about? What are we chatting about? Like, am I in trouble? That's a big one that comes up with millennials, because they want to not break the rules because they want to get ahead. Same with Gen Z. Gen Z, though, when we think about like where they're most comfortable, like they are kind of comfortable with messaging. And like that's why they kind of gravitate towards like WhatsApp. That's where they're gravitating towards
Mm,
text messaging. So they're going to need a little bit of, not, I don't want to say handholding, but a little bit of support and understanding the why we communicate certain ways in the workplace, because to them, until they get to college, until they get to the workplace, it's very casual. It's Snapchat, WhatsApp, group me, all those spaces that are very peer driven and social
mm-hmm.
media DMing, that are not 100% secure for work. And so when we're
Okay.
communicating with Gen Z, what I would suggest doing is when you're welcoming a new Gen Z member to your team, we talk about, and it's up to the older generation to set the tone, to say, hey, this is how I would prefer that we communicate. So you can call me in the middle of the day if you need to. We can FaceTime. After hours, though, I would prefer an email. Like, and you set the tone of saying your communication preferences. Then you say, how can I best communicate with you? And it becomes a
Okay.
two-way conversation on like what's going to be the most effective way for us to communicate with one another. And for Gen Z, it allows them to opt into the things that work. But then that conversation is a really good opportunity to talk about why we email versus why we might use Slack versus why we might use a messaging platform, and the purpose of security at work.
Okay.
Because that's
Okay.
where
That's helpful.
a little bit of that friction comes from. Like, just email. Why don't you understand that? They're like, because I've never emailed anyone besides my college professors, and that was a fight to begin with. Like, so it's just,
Okay, so that helps me,
yeah,
right? So like
yeah.
when we have our folks on the Gen Z side, we give them a little bit of a tutorial of like what
Mhm.
and how to use the channels because they're so used to like the rapid fire communication in those
Yep.
non-secure channels. Okay,
Yeah.
that would help. And then we give them the whys behind it, going back to
Yeah.
the other piece to motivate them to use the channels that we're going to prefer at work. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so as we're rounding this out, I want to just like say the book name again. I also want
Hmm.
to tout something because I think it's amazing. So the book is Generations in the World of Work. We've talked about the
Hmm.
Genesis. It's on Amazon. Is it wherever books are sold?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know
Okay,
if it's at Target, but I don't buy a lot of books from Target.
I don't either.
So I'm like, I'm there for your toiletries and your clothes. But and they're home goods. They got some good home goods. But
Yeah.
yeah, pretty much anywhere you can buy books. It's available
Okay.
through our publisher Routledge as well.
Okay, great. And then the other thing I wanted to tout, because I thought it was really cool, is on your website, you have links to courses, like mini
Hmm.
courses that were really
Yeah.
neat. So if you're a person, you're a new people leader or even a seasoned people leader, and you want to dive into this, especially on the
Hmm.
Gen Z side, you have these like bite-sized courses, which I haven't seen a lot of places. It's like we are trial by fire as leaders, right? And when we're managing these four generations, we don't have, I wish we had you kind of to like give us a primer like you did today everywhere, right?
Hmm.
So then
Yeah.
this is why it is so important to have guests like you on. So if you are interested, please go to the website. We'll link it all in the show notes. We'll link
Yeah.
right to this because I do think those bite-sized courses would be helpful for our leaders out there so that they know how to deal with different generations at work.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of courses right now that are mainly focused on understanding generations and then also Gen Z. Our goal is to get more out about like the four generations in the workplace. But if you're like, I need to do a deep dive on Gen Z, like that's the best place to go. We're not just going to talk at you the whole time. We want learners. It would be pedagogically underserving if we didn't provide some element of reflection for the learner, allow them to do some application, some case study. It's all self-guided, but we want to make sure that there's enough in there to keep you engaged and not just like slide after slide after slide. Like we've all been there before. It's not a fun course. So
Okay, cool. I'm going to
yeah,
dive in myself because I think this was
wonderful.
really helpful for me. So,
Yeah.
what are 1 to 2 ways that you believe women can be braver at work today?
Um, I've I don't want to feminist rant because I could, but I think for women to be braver at work is to ask the question and to not feel bad about asking the question. And I credit and asking the question for what you need. And it's a thing that I learned from a colleague of mine and collaborator, Sophie Wade. She's an incredible work futurist. And I learned this just from traveling with her. And I talk about it all the time that like, we were just checking into a hotel once together for an event. And she was like, can you make sure, she asked the hotel staff, can you make sure that we both have good views of the of the city? We're only here for one night and it would be a shame for us not to be able to see the view of the city from our rooms. And I was like, wow, that was like really specific. And she's like, well, if you never ask for the thing that you might want or need, how will someone ever know?
They
And I'm like,
won't.
they won't. And so I think that a lot of times for women, we're just kind of like, well, I'll take care of it. No one else has to worry about it. And I think to be brave at work is asking politely for the thing that you need or even just want. Like there's nothing selfish in that. And I think being confident and realizing it's okay to ask for the thing you need or want without feeling bad about it. Again, as Sophie would say, the worst thing that they're going to say is no, that's not possible. And you're back to with the nothing that you had before.
Exactly. Okay, well, that is awesome and good reminder for all of us to
Yeah.
say what we need and be even specific. I love that.
Yeah.
Next time I travel for work, I'm going to be like, hey, I need a city view with lilies in the corner. I
But
need
it's
a
like this the small thing, like if the worst thing they're gonna say is, oh no, we're at a full house, we can't move you around. The best
yeah,
thing they're gonna be is like, actually, we're pretty empty tonight. Let me upgrade you. Or, it's being polite and being pleasant goes a long way. I'm not saying
and
like,
being clear, like being
yeah,
clear,
being clear.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing.
yeah,
Okay, so how can women or all listeners that are listening to this
yeah.
connect with you and your work online?
Absolutely. So I love LinkedIn. I'm always open. Just tell me like, hey, in the connection note, like where we connected. So I know that we need to be friends. So LinkedIn's a good one. Megan M. Grace on all social media platforms. And then meganmgrace.com is my website. So I spell my name with an H, which kind of helps find me online. However, if you regret the H, it does get a little bit more difficult. So I got a shout out to the silent H, that it's Meghan. M Grace, just about anywhere you can find people online.
Okay, and again, one last time, the book is called Generations in the World of Work. Amazon and all of the major book retailers, go get it. Go take one of those courses because this has been super helpful for me, and I'm sure it'll be helpful for you. Well, Megan, thank you so much. This is amazing work. It's unique work, right? I don't think how many are there of you in the world? Like, there's probably not a ton of you that are doing this kind of work.
I think I can, it depends on like if they do it full time or if it's like a part of other things they do. I want to say there's like less than 10 of us. So when people are like, who decides this stuff? I'm like, honestly, it decides itself. Like we just like kind of like stock society and see what comes out. Like I don't get to name the generations. Like I don't, it's just, we study it and we see what we lurk. We're lurkers. That's what it is.
Generational lurkers. That's my
That's me.
professional title.
Yeah. That's what people are like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a lurker. in a
That's
cool way.
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for the work you do. And it was great to meet you, of course, again, and Waffle. And keep on keeping on
Thank
and
you.
appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jen.
Well, that does it for my discussion with Meghan today. I hope you found our conversation valuable and inspiring. As a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The show is also available on any other podcast platform you enjoy. Until next time, show up, understand the generations at work, and be brave.